Chancellor, being urged by her political opponents to cancel a planned trip to China in order to respond to the crisis in the bond markets. The government is defending its economic record, even as well the cost of borrowing rises higher than it did under Liz Truss's tenure. What does this all mean? What impact might it have? And how worried should we be? Dr. Roger Gewolb is a geopolitical and money expert, founder of the Campaign for Fair Finance. Roger, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for coming on. Just for those of us that don't have a deep understanding, most of us, I would say, of bond markets and gilt yields and things like that, just talk us through what's happened this week and why, if you think we should be concerned. Evening.
Good evening. Well, yeah, we should be very concerned, and we don't need a deep understanding. This is just totally flawed. It's a comedy. It reminds me of, I can't remember, I think it was Churchill, Ben, who talked about the chap who stood in a bucket and pulled on the handle upwards, trying to lift himself upwards. It's everything this party is doing is like that, to my mind.
What, the Labour Party?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's just just going in directions that are very hard to understand. You don't have to understand all this bond stuff and all these intricate economic details to figure out that if you have a 41 billion pound tax rise, when you already have the highest tax rate since Her late Majesty's coronation, and you then have a tax on free speech and all the other things going on and all the criticisms. How in the world is that going to encourage growth? You can be about 6 and figure that one out. So I don't think this is any surprise at all. And what's completely visible, which just makes people fall out of their chair, is that now the lady is going to China.
Why is that visible? Because she says that's part of getting the growth that you're talking about, building new trading relationships, encouraging inward investment and so on. You disagree, sir?
I do. The Chinese are very cautious in their investments. And when they look at how things are running here, they are not going to rush to invest. But Rachel Reeves has one job, which is to protect the financial integrity of the United Kingdom. And, good grief, she needs to be here in the midst of this crisis. Comparisons to Liz Truss are, I don't know. Liz Truss had a fairly reasonable budgetary proposal, which she mishandled in its presentation and introduction. But Rachel Reeves and her colleagues have an anti-work, anti-business, anti-so many other things agenda, which we were never told about and didn't expect. Okay. And, there's 2 different situations.
Just spell it out for us, Roger, if you would. What's happened this week is basically the cost of government borrowing has gone up. That's correct, isn't it?
To record levels.
To record levels. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for our taxes? What does that mean for public spending? In other words, why does it matter?
It matters because it's part of the calculation of, how much we are worth and how much we owe.
Right.
One of the first things that Labour should have done is to reverse the tradition that's been carried on for years, where we actually pay interest to the banks on the money that's printed by the Bank of England, all of this kind of quantitative easing funny money. Most other countries in the world, Ben, don't pay that interest. We pay about 40 billion pounds a year that we don't really need to incur. That would put 40 billion pounds back in Rachel Reeves's pocket.
Right.
That's the first thing that they should do. The second thing is the bond markets react the way they do by raising rates on what it costs us to borrow.
Yes.
Based on a factor of nervousness. They look at the way Labour and Starmer and Reeves are being criticized. They look at the absurdity of some of the moves, going off to China to say, let's talk about trade. To talk to the Chinese about a trade deal probably takes 3 years.
Right. And there's a crisis now. Does the fact that borrowing costs have gone up so much, it means that Rachel Reeves, if she wants to invest in a health service, transport, health, education, whatever it is, it's harder for her to borrow. So exactly. She either needs to put up taxes more, which she said she won't do, or she's going to have to cut spending. Is that right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Right. So do you think this makes a series of big spending cuts, another age of austerity, more likely, Roger?
I don't know how else she's going to do it because she can't put up taxes anymore. I suppose they could, but I
But she
don't think,
insists she won't. And she
yeah,
said she won't borrow more. So are
yeah.
we potentially heading for austerity round two?
Yeah, well, she hasn't given a blanket, I won't put up taxes. It's kind of like, I won't raise national insurance and VAT and income tax. And then, of
Yes.
course, she raised national insurance on employers. So she might move the goalpost. I mean, this government, this Labour government could save Britain. They could do so much to reverse the 14 years of mistakes and nonsense and gaslighting that the Tories gave us, but they seem to be heading in the opposite direction.
Roger, interesting. Thank you very, very much indeed, Dr. Roger Gewolb, a geopolitical money expert, founder of the Campaign for Fair Finance. Got to say, Rachel Reeves in a bind here. And some of it, as Roger says, you can't help but feeling, is of her own making. Will she be the Chancellor this time next year? People in Westminster are already starting to ask.